We would like to welcome you to the Provo Municipal Council meeting. It's 5:32 on Tuesday, October 23rd. We're convened in the City Center Municipal Council chambers at 351 West Center Street in Provo. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, Provo City Council, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. The council requests that citizens help maintain the decorum of the meeting by turning off electronic devices, being respectful to the council and others, and refraining from applauding during the proceedings of this meeting. We'll begin with a roll call.
Cliff Strachan.
Brian Jones.
Dave Sewell.
George Stewart.
George Handley.
Gary Winterton.
David Harding.
Dave Connect.
Kay Van Buren.
Wayne Parker.
Thank you. We will begin with an opening prayer by Spencer Reese. And I took a little privilege and asked my grandson, Jace Packer, if he would say the pledge for us.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are thankful for the opportunity we have to meet here together in the City Council and discuss topics of the city of Provo. We are thankful for our leaders that strive to guide our city and to help us to improve our lives. We ask that the discussion today be led by the Spirit and that we can all look for opportunities to help our fellow city members. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Please stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will begin with the approval of minutes for August 7th, 2018 council meeting, August 21st, 2018 council meeting, September 25th council meeting, 2018, and October 9th, 2018 council meeting. Are there any changes or corrections or additions to those minutes?
Just want to clarify, did the changes we talked about, was that as part of this? Okay.
Okay, seeing no changes, I declare these minutes approved by unanimous consent. We will now go to our public comment period. Mr. Jones, do you want to introduce that for us?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As indicated on the screen, a required public hearing will be held for certain agenda items prior to council action. After each such item has been presented, time to comment will be provided for all those who wish to speak. For items that do not require a public hearing, public comment will still be taken following presentation of the item, but will be limited to 10 minutes. At this time, 15 minutes have been set aside for an open public comment period, which is intended to allow comment on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Persons who speak during this time to an item that is on the agenda will not normally be afforded a second opportunity to speak during the comment period specific to that item. During any public comment period, each speaker will generally be limited to 2 minutes. Additional time may be given to individuals specifically invited to speak, such as applicants, neighborhood chairs, or others that may be representing additional persons. Please begin your comments by stating your name and city of residence. Due to noticing requirements, no formal action will be taken in this meeting on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Those with comments are invited to approach the podium.
Hello, I'm Jenny Smith. I live at 5440 North Canyon Road. We're technically in the county, the unincorporated part of Provo City. At the end of September, I think the 27th, I sent an email to council members and Mayor Kafusi requesting opportunity to join the conversation about things that are happening in our neighborhood, which we're not technically in a neighborhood, or I guess we're in the North Timpview neighborhood if you include us in there. And we would like to, and several of you have replied back, which I appreciate that we'll continue a conversation about that. I just came today to just ask that, I don't know how to make this happen, but we'd really like to have the people that live along Canyon Road, who are our neighbors, be part of making a plan for our neighborhood. We've seen on the city website that other neighborhoods are meeting and having a conversation with people in the planning commission or the city about what they'd like their neighborhood to look like. And our neighborhood has the potential of lots of things happening in the future, and we'd like to be part of that so that it's done in a thoughtful way and a way that will reflect the wishes of the people in the neighborhood and joining with the city. So I'm just asking that we can do that, and if there's are ways that we can approach that in the best possible way, I'd like to know what those ways are. Thank you.
As I represent the north part of that district, would you please get in touch with me? I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Mary Wade. I'm from the Dixon neighborhood. I'm here tonight. We've been working on bike lanes for 500 North, and as it stands right now, we're told the public works policy is to wait until the road is resurfaced, which is going to be about another 3 to 5 years. And we are specifically wanting to work on better access to the library. So I came tonight to share a story. 3 years ago, I buckled my 2 kids into our bike trailer and headed out to the Provo Library for story time. As always, I rode my bike on the right side of the road as we headed eastbound along 500 North for story time. But worried about making that left-hand turn into the library amid busy traffic. Right before University Avenue, I crossed to the north side of the street to the sidewalk, thinking I'd be safer. That would be the safer choice, because then I'd already be on the library side of the street after crossing University Avenue. I thought wrong. I was hit by a car turning right when the driver apparently looked but didn't really see me. And even as my head hit the pavement, all I could think of was to squeeze my brakes as tightly as possible to make sure that my children behind me weren't hit as well. And afterward, in my gratitude that we were okay and we were able to walk away, I didn't even think about calling the police. But ever since that day, I've been unable to stop wondering if the choices for our families trying to access the library by bike are to either make a dangerous left-hand turn among heavy traffic or to be on the sidewalk where they're less visible and more likely to be hit. Are public amenities really accessible for everyone? I believe the Public Works policy to wait for scheduled resurfacing is a smart, responsible policy. However, for our public amenities like the library and schools, we have a pressing need for more proactive efforts to keep our children and families safe. This stretch isn't scheduled, like I said, for 3 to 5 years, during which you can bet many more accidents will happen, reported and unreported, involving people just trying to get to story time. The city needs to prioritize creating safe lanes from the rec center to the library, as well as adding a new crosswalk just south of the library on 100 East. Active transportation is a healthy mode of transportation that also helps address congestion, inversion, and parking issues, making Provo a better place for everyone. Let's make the healthy choice the safe choice for our families trying to access the library and schools. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bryant Jensen. I live in and own a home in the Timpanogos neighborhood, across the street from the elementary school. I have been biking to BYU where I work for the last 6 years. And I am in between bicycle lanes and sidewalks to make it to work, and also to the library. So I just want to echo Mary's concerns. And I was also hit this week a block from the library. It wasn't a traumatic accident, so I didn't think to report it. So I think as you're looking at your numbers about reported incidents and accidents with bicycles, know that there's probably a lot of unreported incidents as well. Thankfully, my child was not with me. My child attends BYU preschool, and so rides with me every morning, but not on the way back, because I work longer than he's at school. But if he would have been with me, he would have fallen over and could have been injured as well. So again, we're doing lots of wonderful things. The one positive thing that came out of this accident this week for me, because my front wheel was bent and I can't ride my bike until it's fixed, is that I learned the virtues of the new bus system. And I took the bus from work here, and it's wonderful. And so I think we're at a point where we can really be assertive in establishing a culture of respecting cyclists. Before moving here, I lived in Eugene, Oregon, and people would wait for me on my bicycle from blocks away because there was a culture of respecting cyclists. And I think that with all the changes on university and around campus, this is a great opportunity to really enforce that culture with more bike lanes, more signage to respect pedestrians and cyclists as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no one else coming forward, we will close this portion of the meeting, the public comment portion, and we will move on to item number 1, a resolution adding the House. No, I'm going to change this. I think we need to, it's item number 5. So a resolution adding the house generally located at 395 East, 100 North to the Provo Landmarks Register in the Joaquin Neighborhood. And this will be presented by Josh Yost.
Thank you. Scott and Whitney Christofferson have requested that their home be listed or on the Provo Landmarks Register. Their home was constructed in 1932. It's 86 years old and is within Provo City, which meets the first 2 criteria designated in the Landmarks Ordinance for listing in Provo's Landmarks Register. The additional criteria related to listing are A through F in our ordinance, and out of those 6 or 7 criteria, this home meets 4 of those criteria in that it is currently listed on our National Landmarks Register as part of the East Central Historic District that encompasses portions of the Joaquin and Mazer neighborhood. It is associated with the lives of persons significant in the history of the city, mainly Walter S. Hedquist and his wife, who was Velma Hedquist and served as president of the Literary League of Provo and was very involved civically, in addition to her husband's role in running the Hedquist pharmacies here in Provo. And then D, in that it embodies the distinctive characteristics of a rare, unique type, and it represents the work of an architect or builder recognized as a master in the field. This home was constructed by Joseph Nelson, who was a master architect in the first half of the 20th century in Provo, who designed buildings such as the Utah County Courthouse, Dixon Junior High School, the Grant Building, or what's known as the Testing Center at BYU, the first library, as well as Allen and Amanda Knight Halls at BYU, and other homes and civic structures throughout Utah. And then under criteria F, it is also eligible because of its prominent spatial location on a corner, and it is an easily identifiable visual feature of the neighborhood. For these reasons, the Landmark Commission recommends to use the City Council that this home be added to the Provo Landmarks Register, and I can answer any questions that you have.
We have seen this in our work session last week, last council meeting. There's a picture. Thank you. Mr. Sewell.
Mr. Chair, this isn't directly related to this item, but just as you were closing public comment, I noticed at least 1, if not 2, people that were kind of gesturing like they wanted to come up. So I just wanted to mention it in case after this is over, if you wanted to consider reopening it to let them speak.
Thank you. Any question on this item? Dave?
I just noticed, not really a question, but I just noticed that this is a 2015 photograph. I believe I saw on social media a more current photograph, and there have been some changes. There's some spider webs and Halloween decorations.
Maybe some seasonal
throughout
decor
the-
that has
throughout
adorned
the
the
yard.
house, yes.
So I think they're involved in the community.
Okay, thank you. This item is open for public comment, and so we will invite anyone that's interested in talking about this to come forward.
And the property owner's also here.
Oh,
unless
thank you.
If you
I
want to hear from them.
appreciate that, Josh. We will open that to the property owner first.
That's me and my wife. I can't take credit for the spider webs. That was all her and my 3 kids, and they're pretty sweet. So I also happen to know I'm good friends with your son, Councilman Winterton, Jimmy. I've known him for a long time. So I just wanted to say a few things. One of the reasons we wanted to put this on the or put it up on the Landmarks Register. First of all, I'm a professor at BYU. I teach documentary film. I also have a master's degree in sociocultural anthropology. And for me, architecture can often be a really big foundation and important part of culture, preserving culture, and maintaining character within a community. Joseph Nelson was a really important architect in Provo City, and I think that's one of the big reasons why we're doing this, why we wanted to preserve this house for as long as possible. And in connection with that, as you know, one of his greatest works, one of Joseph Nelson's greatest works, the Amending Night Hall, is also threatened with demolition. And so, you know, if we, our family can play some small role in preserving some of his work in our home, we definitely want to do that. Thank you for considering us.
Thank you, Scott. Looking for a neighborhood chair. Celeste? Not here now. Okay, then right now we will open this for public comment if anyone would like to come forward and speak to this.
Hi, I'm here for 2 reasons tonight. But I am Scott, I'm the Christofferson's neighbor, and they take such great care of this home and have made it been such a vital part of our neighborhood. And I would love to see that they can keep this house on the historic registry. It would be wonderful.
Thank you.
Did we get the name?
That's what could you state your name?
Yes, Megan Van Wagen.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, then we will close this item and bring it back to the council. Dave?
Just a question. When was the last time we had a previous property added to the register?
The last property added to the register was earlier this year, property on East Center Street, east of 9th East, owned by North Thurston. So.
And before that, it seems like there's been a gap.
We've had 3 in the last year and a half, and before that it was in the decade range.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Thank you. It is an effort to maintain these buildings, these older homes, and I appreciate the effort that goes into that. Any other discussion or question, Dave?
I just want to express my appreciation as well to all property owners who keep up their properties, but particularly for those that are in the older homes that have these community assets and then are willing to register their homes, basically adding regulations onto themselves but for the good of the community. And that really is a selfless act that benefits the community. So I salute you and the others who have done this. Thank you.
Okay, we have an implied motion. If there's no other changes, we'll call for a vote. Those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item number... Oh, you know, I apologize, but when we close, I kind of feel like I'm obligated to close it at a certain point, and I apologize for not doing that, for public comment. I think we heard from a couple of bike people, and I think these other two people would want to talk about bicycles, but I think we've closed it, and it's always the first portion of the meeting. And so I just feel obligated to maintain council rule and not reopen. That's what we've done in the past, and so I'm going to hold to that. We will go on to item number 6, an ordinance to amend the general plan map regarding land west of the I-15 freeway and south of the Provo River, Lakewood, Sunset, Provo Bay, and Fort Utah neighborhoods. And Bill Pepperoni is going to step in for Brian Maxfield today.
Thank you. Approximately 10 months ago, a steering committee was formed by the Community Development Department to continue working on the Westside master plan. The steering committee included 13 people who were primarily farmers and property owners and representatives of the neighborhood organization, but it also included people like Don Jarvis, who's on the agricultural committee and on the sustainability committee. It included Dave Arnold, who's a Westside resident, but he's also a TMAC member. And then we also included a couple members of the Planning Commission. After several months of meeting, the steering committee came up with a land use map. And we, about 6 months ago, took that map out to a large, well-advertised neighborhood meeting. After we took, we took a version of this map out to a neighborhood meeting, and after the neighborhood meeting, we put the map on Open City Hall and left it there for about 2 months to take public input. During that time, we received 44 comments from the public, which was generally supportive of the map. Once we got that information, that feedback from the community, we went back to the steering committee and we made adjustments to the map. We took that map to the Planning Commission. Once the Planning Commission held a public hearing, the steering committee met again and made further revisions to the map based on Planning Commission input, and input that we received during the Planning Commission public hearing. So this map you have before you was a result of all of that. This is probably the 4th or 5th land use map we've gone through or we've created. As you can see from the map, we're calling for several different types of residential development on the west side. The most acreage is in this yellow color, designated as RES, and that would be designated as 4 units to the acre. At some point, the City Council would need to give us your decision and feedback on whether that should be calculated as 4 units to the acre on a net calculation or gross calculation. We've included quite a few opportunities for commercial development to help offset, to give the city the income that the city would need to offset all the residential housing. This represents 4,006 new dwelling units. The 4,006 new dwelling units, we hope, will be enough to get commercial amenities on the west side, which has been stated time and time again to us as a desperate need of the west side and a desire for the west side. We've included some agricultural land because we've received input from people asking that there be some ag preservation on the west side. Perpetually, we think the ag preservation will be south of the road. The current general plan designates this as agriculture. We This plan will suggest that this continue to just remain as agricultural land. This property here in the near future would stay in agriculture, but at some point in the future, if those property owners ask for a different development pattern, this that's within the airport protection area would eventually become airport-related commercial or industrial. Just to orient you, that's primarily the Harry McCord greenhouses and pumpkin, corn maze and those activities. This is primarily John Hinckley's property. All of that is John Hinckley's property. This that's outside of the airport protection area, we would anticipate someday becoming residential like this. So this map that you see before you is just the next step on the Westside plan. Once this map is adopted, or some version of this is adopted by the City Council, the staff will begin drafting language, the verbiage version of the plan, half of the plan, that will reflect this and help to make this happen. The steering committee will continue to be involved with the written portion of the master plan, and when we get that done, that will eventually come to you for your approval also. The plan does call for commercial development on both sides of the Lakeview Parkway here. Village Center there, the Smith property that Smith owns right now is right there. These other corners are either currently used as commercial or shown on the general plan as commercial. Probably the biggest change to the plan would be this MDR area. Medium density residential allows up to 30 units to the acre. And again, just to orient you, this north area of that is a trailer park, and this south area is a neighborhood of post-World War II homes. These nodes here would allow for neighborhood commercial, but would not dictate or require neighborhood commercial. It's simply saying on those intersections, on those corners, that may be appropriate. If the property owner, developer, whoever in the future would like to pursue that, they can, but it's not, wouldn't be mandated in the plan that you have to develop commercially there. Of course, our regional sports park is here, and there were comments received in the open city hall about formal ball fields being there, and that only has use or value if you play those sports. It's my understanding that there is plan for neighborhood commercial, neighborhood park amenities within that. So the swing set and the tot lot type of facilities will be included in that park. Those are the highlights of the plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if there's something I left out, I'd be happy to.
Dave?
So did you still need any guidance from us on the nature of the density, like 10,000 square foot lots, the net versus gross? I'm certainly in favor of the R110 versus the R16.
Thank you. Yes, so the steering committee recommended, let me back up again. The current general plan says this, the entire west side should be 4 units to the acre on a gross calculation basis. So if I have 20 acres, I get 20 times 4, I can put 80 units on my property. By the time you put 80 units on 20 acres, you end up with a lot of 6,000 square foot lots. So the steering committee recommended that this go to a net calculation. So you take out the roads, and then you get 4 units to the acre. The Planning Commission also agreed and recommended that same thing. The reason why you have these higher density nodes is to offset the density loss from lowering these areas from essentially 4 units to the acre to 2.8 units to the acre. That's what it basically comes down to. But that allows you to go from having 6,000 square foot lots to having 10,000 square foot lots.
Which also gives a greater balance to the community, the neighborhood out there, where they have a lot of starter homes existing and they need some move-up homes, correct?
Yes, the last time this map went back to the steering committee, one of the steering committee members asked, how many apartment units, townhome units, attached housing units have we approved, has the Planning Commission approved in the last couple years? And it was over 1,000, and then asked, okay, so then how many single-family lots has the Planning Commission seen in that same time frame? And it was a very low number. So this was an attempt to help, again, balance that. And by having the attached housing nodes here, it will allow for more affordable housing product types to balance what would be more expensive housing on the lower density areas. So again, I explained this to you in the pre-meeting. This plan is an unbelievable attempt at balancing a whole lot of opposing suggestions for how the West Side should develop.
And one last thing, we've seen maps of the infrastructure with the different pump stations and the different sewer lines, and the fact that we have limited capacity unless we put in new pump stations or dig up streets. And I know that they can make adjustments and all, but this plan takes that into consideration, so we're not overbuilding for what infrastructure we have, correct?
Yeah, the good news about this map is that Public Works is using this for their infrastructure planning, and this much detail gives them a lot of information. The bad news is now they want the same kind of map for north of the river. And we don't have that yet, and this takes a lot of work to produce, so.
Well, they do need to plan, but I'm just saying there's a lot of stuff already in the ground. We have a certain fixed number of pump stations, although I suppose they could add another pump station. And we have certain size pipes going through certain neighborhoods at a certain capacity. And that's part of the reason why we talked about the 4 units per acre on the west side overall in the beginning. And so when you say that we're down to 2.8 in some areas and we're balancing that with the LDR, as an overall west side, how close did we come to the goal of 4 units per acre for the sewage capacity?
All the previous versions have stuck very close to that 4 units to the acre, which is about 3,500 dwellings. This last plan jumped up to 4,000, just over 4,000, because the Planning Commission increased some of the attached housing nodes. So we're within about 500 units of what's been anticipated for a long time.
Right, and that also helps by having that LDR and the higher numbers. It helps with our affordability.
Yes.
Providing affordable housing.
Yeah. And actually, if we end up with substantial infrastructure improvements going in on this side, like a new treatment plant, the additional dwelling units are going to help fund that. Additional dwelling units are a good thing if that's what happens.
I don't know if you can answer this, Bill, but I see Dave, maybe he can too, either one of you. But I know to get a lot of grants for our airport and the improvements for our airport, we have been able to purchase ground and actually throw ground into our master plan, which would count towards a match for federal funds. Does this map include any opportunity for that, or does it prohibit any opportunity for that? Because we've used so much of that to be able to do what we need to do at the airport.
The proposed map certainly does not prohibit any potential property that could be utilized for grant match. So what has happened in the past is the city would go out and acquire property that is in proximity to the airport that may be for sale, and then we utilize that as the grants come in to the airport through the FAA. We use that for grant match.
Does that land have to be contiguous to property that the airport already is in control of?
It has to be airport related. It does not have to necessarily be immediately adjacent to the airport, but it has to be airport related and remain airport related.
Thank you.
Bill, I had a couple questions. One is, I'm not really familiar, to be honest, with how something this big gets executed over time. And I think maybe what worries me is that, maybe piecemeal as it's coming in, there's opposition to the LDR so that gets dropped, and then there's opposition to another one, and that gets dropped, and the next thing you know, you don't actually have the density that we were aiming for. And related to that, the mixed-use areas are very attractive to me, and I'm worried that if they're optional, that maybe they too disappear. And if all of them disappear, then you've got a bit of a problem. You have a lot of people with not a lot of commercial activity near them. They're going to have to be driving. We don't have UVX down there or anything like that, so it seems like we would want to make sure. So anyway, anything you can tell me to help me understand how this works and how we can make sure that it gets implemented properly and make sure that they're not ending up driving long distances to get anywhere.
Okay. We have some representatives of the neighborhood program here, so if I leave out something or get something wrong, please, on this issue, chime in. One of the values of the neighborhood plan going through this process is that by the time we end up with an adopted plan, there seems to be broad-based enough support that the rezonings become less controversial. Every rezoning application I can remember for years on the west side has been controversial. And so we're hoping that just going through this planning process and including as many people as we have, that lessens with future applications if developers follow the plan. If they don't follow the plan, they're not likely to get a recommendation for approval from the staff. The balance of the plan, the written part, is going to be very descriptive, both in language and in photographs, of what we are anticipating these areas to look like. And again, that will help developers understand what the ground rules are and what the expectations are as this goes forward. So far, we haven't had a controversial rezoning come up within an area where we did a neighborhood plan. We'll have to wait and see how this goes on this side. But the idea is to make this as clear as possible, both to the residents so they know what's happening and to the developers who come in, so that every plan, every rezoning is not a battle. Like I've told you in other meetings, what has been a source of that conflict in the past is our current general plan says 4 units to the acre gross is acceptable. You can ask for that. It's acceptable. When they actually try to draw that into a subdivision and they have all these 6,000 square foot lots, the neighborhoods have not reacted well to that because that suggests to them just more starter homes. And a large part of the west side is saying, can't we get some move up type of housing and something larger than that, something that can hold more children in a bigger family. So in a way, I think the staff has kind of set these developers up for this public beating in the public meeting by setting them out to do what the general plan suggests. They're innocent. They're just saying, I'm just doing what the plan says I can do. Right. And the neighbors are saying to the staff, this is the 6th plan like this we've seen. We've told the last 5 we don't like it. Why do you keep sending these people to us? So that's what we're trying to get past with all this.
Yeah. With the mixed use thing, I mean, why not require rather than just recommend, though? What was the reasoning behind just keeping it a flexible?
Because we feel like we have more nodes than will probably be needed, and we wanted to let the market drive that, let the market go where it wants to go.
I mean, is there a point at which, if no one has developed any of them yet, that we can shift gears and say, okay, now we need to require it because we're down to 2 left and nobody's done it yet, or something like that?
Yeah, certainly. The gentleman who owns this property here currently lives in American Fork, and at the Planning Commission meeting, he talked about where he lives. He can walk to the store, he can walk to the post office. He's got a lot of services he can walk to, and talked about his quality of life because of that. And he voiced his opinion on why that he likes to keep that and would want to keep that just for that quality of life kind of reason.
Okay.
So I noticed that you probably had more nodes than you actually needed, but the market is going to pick and choose where they want to go. And at some point, we will have to assess whether the needs of the community are being met. And if we feel they are, and that there's, no need for future development, then it could be developed into something else. Meanwhile, I think it's our responsibility in the Planning Commission and staff to say that these are reserved for this purpose until we meet the needs of the west side for commercial shopping.
Okay.
I just want to point out that this is a future land use map, And so all of the rezoning would still need to take place. This is a great way to communicate with the community and with developers, what is expected. But those final decisions will lie with either us or a future council.
And hopefully it's a good way to communicate to future residents that look at this and decide whether or not they want to invest in the West Side by purchasing property or home there.
Yes, Dave?
One last thing. To me, this is kind of monumental. It seems like it was in the early 90s we had the first West Side plan, which also called for 10,000 square foot lots. No surprise, but this has been so many years in the coming, and it's been so difficult that I just want to express my appreciation to everyone involved that we have finally done it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, do you have something else, Dave? We are going to be continuing unless you want to do it right now.
Just really quick, yeah. There's some talk, and Mr. Pepperoni mentioned again that at some point he'd like to hear the council weigh in on the 4 units gross or whatever, and I just wanted to take the opportunity from my perspective. This is what I would like to see. This is what I was hoping to see when I was on the previous iteration of the committee. 4 units gross, but on average. And so I'm very happy to see areas of less, in some instances much less, in other areas that will be greater than the 4, but on average it's 4. Let me also just put in a plug that I would also like to see, even in those large yellow blobs of residential, which are, you're talking about 4 units per acre net. I would still like to see that as an average. So you might have some lots that are 12 or 20,000 square feet, but with those, then you can have some that would be less, so that on average it comes out to the 10,000.
Okay, we'd like to open this up. Are there any representative of the West Side Citizens Advisory Committee that would like to speak on this right now? We will be hearing from we have an opportunity. Your name's on the agenda here: Becky Bogdan, Brian Taylor, Kathy Sorensen, and Jonathan Hill, and anyone else that would like to at this point.
Beth Alligood, Southwest Area Representative. Just real quick to answer your question, George. Typically, developers do not come asking for less density, they come asking for a lot more density. So I cannot see that scenario playing out at all. I see it actually going opposite, and that 4 units per acre getting pushed up instead of pushed down. Sorry, that's just my experience as a neighborhood chair. This has been a long time coming. I appreciate all the efforts that everybody's made on it. I think it's a great baseline to start with. I think it's a great thing to put on the books. I don't expect this to be set in stone. As development starts coming out, as commercial starts coming out, things do shift and change as the economics of the area shift and change. I just want to point out that a lot of people focus on the commercial nodes, but you also have all of that airport commercial and airport amenities there. So you're actually looking at maybe a quarter of the area out there going to commercial. So that is going to be really economically driven, and that's going to be airport driven out there too. In the text for this, what the neighborhood chairs have been advocating for is the mixed variable lot sizes, housing developments, and at the same time, with those variable lot size housing developments, maybe an opportunity to do some agricultural preservation with that and still have the overall 4 units per acre. So there's a lot of things that are going to be going into the text of this that's going to inform this a lot more. So do you have any questions for me? No. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Beth.
Great job.
It was them.
Okay, we have a presentation from the 4 we just named. Are you just going to yeah, Jonathan, you're going to represent the group? Is that, or they all want to come up?
Becky's going to come up after I'm finished.
Well, let's see, yes, and we're working with neighborhood chairs. Let's move on to neighborhood chairs, unless there's any other. Yes, I see that on the notes.
Everything.
Okay, you are everything. But is there anyone else on the Westside Planning Citizens Advisory Committee that would like to speak?
Yeah, I'm on it too. That's okay. Tom can come up. I'll be the transition.
Jonathan, we'll let you come back in a minute, and you can wear both hats at that time, but let's take care of the Advisory Committee first.
My name is Tom Halliday. I'm part of the Westside Planning Committee. I believe that there was a lot of effort taken to try to consider property owners' thoughts, intentions, what their feelings are for the future. I believe that it was a big task to try to take on everybody's thoughts and feelings and also the needs of the city. I think that Bill and his committee has done a great job of that. I think that if we move forward with this plan, it'll probably be a good opportunity for future cities to work with and maybe plan for it. I think it allows for a lot of growth, but allows for a lot of conservative adjustments to be made and to kind of take care of the wants and the feelings of the city, the people that live in the city. As a landowner, I feel like my feelings and thoughts were taken into consideration. I didn't get everything I wanted, but I feel like the things were considered and the best came out of it for me and the city both. The biggest fear I have is as we move forward, if utilities don't take a hold and move towards the needs of this growth, it's going to be hard for the growth to happen. So I think that might be something that you have in the back of your mind as you go forward. You're going to have to move forward with the utilities to make this all happen. So thank you. Any questions?
Those utilities are not in the back of our mind, they're in the front. We are really focused on those.
Thank you.
And let me just say again, thank you to the committee and to the staff, everyone who's worked on this. This is a monumental undertaking.
Okay, now we'll start with neighborhood chairs and start at the bottom of the list here, Jonathan. Thank you.
So yeah, my name is Jonathan Hill. I'm the Fort Utah Neighborhood Chair. I was also on the Citizens Advisory Committee working both in the last iteration and this iteration of the committee to help put this plan together. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate some of the thoughts that we've heard tonight from Bill and from some of you. And that is this idea of, what is the right balance of density that we need in this area. And I think to really understand it, it's really important to look at Provo as a whole. When I look at Provo, one of the things I think is really cool about the city is how many distinct neighborhoods we have, right? The River Bottoms is nothing like the Joaquin Neighborhood, which is nothing like the Westside, which is nothing like downtown. We have these distinct neighborhoods, and what this does is creates different environments that will attract different groups of people to those environments, and we can all live here together in this city that we enjoy. On the West Side, particularly what draws people out there is a little slower pace and a little more open feel than we tend to get in most of Provo, right? And I think this plan does a great job of trying to address that while at the same time balancing that idea with affordable housing, have a little bit higher density because prices are going up in the city as well. And it does a great job of that. You notice the higher density nodes, for example, are pushed kind of away from the existing neighborhoods so that those neighborhoods can maintain their feel, can maintain their unique character while still providing those different areas. Also, just to comment on what development looks like when we come out here and how do the neighborhoods respond to this. I've been involved in several developers already coming out to the Fort Utah neighborhood looking at tracts of land. In fact, I can tell you every open acre of land in my neighborhood has already had a developer present on it in the last 2 years. The developments that they've proposed are very different. One of them said, to heck with the general plan. I want to put a whole bunch of townhomes in. I want a higher density, et cetera. And the neighborhood was really grateful to have the existing general plan so that we could go to them and say, no, that doesn't fit, and have something to kind of back it up and say, it's not just us being mean, this is actually what the neighborhood's supposed to look like. On the flip side, we recently had a developer come out, actually on Tom Halliday's land, and he had contacted me ahead of time and said, hey, what do we need to do? And I showed him this map. And they created a plan that had varied lot sizes. Some of the lots were as small as 6,000. Some of them were as large as 12 or 14,000 square feet, with different ranges in between, with an average of 8,000 square feet. Now, the reason why it wasn't 10 is because they were right along the river, and they said, hey, let's take the south side of the river and make this an open trail, public use space, and count that as part of our net acreage. Which I think, side note, that's an open question that is not directly addressed in this map. How do we account in net versus gross for things like a park or something that the builder is going to put into that area and maintain as publicly accessible common space? Anyway, so they brought that, and I showed the neighborhood this map as well at the beginning of the meeting, and the neighborhood said, hey, this fits what we're looking for, let's support it, and they actually voted unanimously to support that plan. It's now on hold because of the good old utility issue out there, especially getting sewer to that place. But it does show that the neighborhoods will support it if it fits the neighborhood plan. They're not just going to turn around and say, well, I don't care what the neighborhood plan says, we want something different. They're going to stick to it, generally speaking. And then finally, I just wanted to talk about the need for housing balance in general. In Provo, it's interesting, Bill mentioned this. When I get the little notifications coming through my email, it's apartment complex after townhome after apartment complex that's coming through. There's been over 1,000 units in the last couple of years. And so what I'm seeing are, my kids' friends, families, et cetera, saying, hey, we're getting too big. We want to stay in Provo. We want a larger home on a larger lot, but they just don't exist. And so they end up moving to Lehigh or south to Mapleton or Spanish Fork to get those housing types. And really, when I look at Provo, that's the housing type that is lacking. And we need that housing type because it brings in a little higher income, it attracts retailers, and helps create kind of a stability and more of a demographic balance within our city. I see that paired with a downtown area where I see it growing up, and I really hope that our downtown continues to grow to get more apartments, to get more smaller units, because that is the area where we can put restaurants in, we can have parks for the people. It's right along the UVX line, right? We have transportation-oriented development. That is where we can put the higher density development and then have the west side and these other outlying areas as the move-up homes that will be a lower density and a larger home type. So with that, if you guys have any questions. Okay, good.
Are we still doing the state your name thing and what city
Please
I live
do,
in?
Becky.
My name is Becky Bogdan. I live in Provo, Utah, and apparently I'm a good citizen because I have the Griswold House of Halloween. I'm the Lakewood Neighborhood Chair. I was not on the committee. Just to start out with some of these notes, I did send you all like a really huge, long email, so I'm sure you're all familiar with what I'm going to go into, but I'll just make it kind of short because you guys do have that lengthy email to read. The one on 1100 West. Okay, so we do have big-time commercial off of 500 West in the neighborhood, and then if we look directly to the east of us, we have quite a bit of commercial there as well. The neighborhood would love that node gone. We do have commercial within walking distance. We do have plenty of gas stations. That is the desired site for Dixon Junior High to be moved to. So we would rather have that road not have any extra congestion on it and just let our commercial reside over where it's at. And then the commercial, that was increased on us. we would like the opportunity, as you can see, all of these little yellow places over there don't fall in much to Lakewood. We would like the opportunity, if commercial does expand to the south, to maybe shrink that at the top or just keep it to the south to kind of protect that neighborhood and give us some opportunity to have some more move-up homes over there. We are lumped in with the Franklin and the Franklin South as far as our schools go. For Sunset View and Franklin is where my neighborhood is split in half. And both of those, as you well know, in the Franklin South neighborhoods, they are so hard that they are actually split into 3 different elementary schools, 2 different high schools, and 2 different junior highs. So we like the opportunity to kind of help us move up, instead of something that we really can't absorb. Thank you.
Okay, this item is open for public comment, and we'll invite anyone that would like, from the public that would like to comment on this to come forward now.
My name is Kelly Watson, and I'm here with Bach Homes. We are under contract for the parcel at the southeastern corner there, the one where the commercial node has been increased. So in speaking with Becky and some of the other neighborhood members, as well as the Planning Commission and City Council as well, I found that there's a unanimous desire for a grocer in this particular location. What we would like to do in this parcel is to have a reduction to the commercial, and I've been in touch with AmSource, and we've drawn up a plan, and we have a committed grocer for the site. So as opposed to increasing the commercial and expecting this to just kind of sit vacant, waiting for some big box to come in, we have a plan, we have a grocer, we have AmSource who designs these grocer-anchored shopping centers. So there would be a total of 18 acres of commercial in the parcel, and then we would have 19 acres of combined multifamily, which would be apartments, and then townhomes as well. And some of the townhomes would be for rent and some would be for sale. So basically, we think that this would be a better use for this, and I know Mr. Pepperoni had commented that there was kind of 2 comments that he made that stuck out to me, that basically as developers come in and come to these parcels, if it doesn't, comply with what the future land use is, then they're going to meet severe objection and it's not going to be approved by staff. But then he also said that anything we do here would have to be rezoned to comply with the future land use. So I'm not necessarily asking that you, give us carte blanche what we're looking for here, but we do have a committed grocer. We have a committed designer that designs these type of centers, that knows the complementary types of uses that go well with a grocer in this site. And it is a destination grocer, and we would keep it to the south, that you allow for some flexibility to this portion, that, if we get a certain type of retailer in there, or if we get a certain percentage of commercial, that we could have some flexibility on the density in this particular parcel. And to be clear, to the north and the west sides is where the lower density townhomes would be, and the density with the multifamily apartment project would be further to the south, as would be the grocer. It would be on the southeast corner. And I do have a site plan if anyone is interested in looking.
Question.
Go ahead, Dave.
So have you sat down with Dixon Homes?
Yes, I have met with Dixon Homes, and I know that he has plans of bringing a big box retailer in there, but as of my conversations with him, he doesn't have anyone committed for it. I understand obviously his desire to have additional space for retail for the purposes of revenue for the city, but we're ready and willing to have someone in there, and they're looking at a 1 to 2 year time frame, which aligns perfectly with the level of work and improvement we'd have to do to the parcel to bring it up above floodplain and to do everything else to make it workable. So
You say grocer on the west side, and we all perk up here a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you'll just give us a chance, I appreciate what you're doing here.
Yeah,
and as we look forward to the opportunities in the future, I think if we work with community development, with Dixon Homes, and with the council, we are definitely amenable to certain things. I think some of the opposition that we find mostly is higher density in a residential area. And so I think that we would be, I would be open to some of those discussions as we go forward.
yes, certainly. And I know Becky had raised some concerns. I believe the community was called the Boulders. Is that the one that's kind of questionable?
We-
We're not looking at building anything like that. It's a very nice community. It has a splash pad. It has a lot of family-oriented amenities in it. It has higher unit mixes, so it's like more 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, that it attracts more of those transitional families, you know, family that perhaps one of the, you know, the spouses is attending BYU or has a job here, and they're not sure where they want to buy yet. It kind of is more of that demographic. And we have multiple multifamily projects throughout Utah County and Salt Lake County, and they're all very high-end, very nice communities. Even the ones built 10 years ago are still exceeding expectations as far as current design standards.
I appreciate that, but again, we're listening to the grocer.
Okay.
That's
No,
where
I just
we're-
wanted to
that's
make
where
that
we're
clear.
gonna-
too.
that's
I
the
want
one
to
that's
let you know
gonna
that
get us.
it's a holistic approach I have here. I know a lot of
Okay.
developers will come in and just pick one thing to shove down your throat. So we're looking at pleasing everyone if possible.
Okay.
We'll see. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to comment on this? Seeing none, this item has been, was heard on the Planning Commission. Oh, Dixon's coming up here. We better hear from him.
We don't have to hear.
I want to hear from you, my friend.
Laser pointer. As far as our office is concerned, we're not real tipped over if it's 16 or 18. I mean, the market's going to dictate, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, at some point, the acreages come off of these polygons. And so many years ago, and Mr. Connect is right, in the early 90s, down in our office, which used to be vacant space before it was Parks and Rec, or maybe it was Parks and Rec, I don't remember, there was a Westside master plan, and it was mostly all yellow and some green, and there was a couple red dots and a couple of spots, and George will remember this too. This is still very general, which is great. In times past, we've had a really specific general plan, and people could go to their house and point to it and say, my house is general plan this, and that has philosophical debates on either side on how specific or general you want it, and you know, we're okay either way. You know, how much on these, you know, how big are these? Or is that 5 acres? Is it 10 acres? Is it 20 acres? It's probably not that big, but you know, could this go a little bit either way? Could the LDR go? I mean, so a lot of these, I hope these lines are kind of amorphous, and you know, are they really? So again, if this is, wouldn't want it to go see all residential, because I just don't think so. It'd be nice to have some commercial. Again, if you have a market in hand, you know, 1 in hand worth 2 in the bush, you know, you think about that. What we would really like to see is the continuation of the opportunity to have something south. And again, just for the public record, we think that piece is unique enough because it's adjacent to the off-ramp, which we'll still call the interchange. There's no other parcels like that in this part of town. Further south is more swampy, and remains to be seen how much of this could actually be developed, and neither one of those sites will be really cheap sites to develop. They'll be expensive, but guaranteed if they're residential, they'll never be commercial, right? I mean, so it's just, and again, it's a general plan, and if they can make something happen in 2 years, that's awesome. Obviously, we've been trying, and it's been no secret that we have wanted a bigger box on this because of the interchange and, you know, thinking Home Depot and the mall. But if someone can put a market right here, you know, who's to say that that's bad? I mean, it maybe doesn't reach its full potential, but you know, we have the south side that has some possibilities. So again, and then the other thing that we'd want to speak about is the opportunities for the continuation of the airport environs for light industrial and or airport related uses next to the airport. We think that's important to maintain the opportunity to have future employment at the airport, whether it be directly airport related or if it's some kind of light industrial, light manufacturing. And the beauty about the plan is that anyone who is farming this ground now can continue to do so. And if they want the upside of opportunity for, again, airport-related light industrial, light manufacturing, that would be theirs to gain or not. And so again, we applaud the effort that's happened on the west side and think it's a good plan. I think Bill Pepperoni is exactly right. A lot of negotiations. This plan is not perfect. I don't think there is a perfect plan because there's always going to be someone who is not happy with some aspect of it, but I think there's a lot of people that are at least happy or it's predictable, right? It's predictable, and that's what any type of development and or community wants. So again, that could go a lot of different ways. So any questions for me?
Thanks, Dixon. This item was heard on October 10th by the Planning Commission, and that means that this is our first hearing on this. If there's any council member that would like to consider this during our next council meeting, which would be in 3 weeks because of the election, we would invite that suggestion now.
So I don't have any particular concern specifically about what's being presented, and so that's not the reason why I'm going to request that we continue this for another 2 weeks. But I just feel that what we talked about is the things that we would pass on the first hearing were routine, non-controversial, and this is so monumental. Even though I support it, I still feel like it would benefit the public to have it out for another couple of weeks before we actually vote on it. So I'll request that we continue it for another 2 weeks.
Okay, with that being said, we will plan that for November 13th. Okay.
I think before we end this, I just want to reach out to Bill and his other ones who helped. This took a lot of work and a lot of patience, and I recognize that. Being on the committee, it was back and forth in many meetings, and it really got home to, I think, a good plan. And to George's worries, the plan is a plan, and for any changes, it would come back to this body anyway. And so all we can do is put a plan out there that's very specific, but the developers will come and ask for changes if they want to change, and we'll have to look at them then, or whoever sits in these seats. So I just want to commend, thanks Community Development and Bill, and hope we can go forward with this and get it on the plan so we can go forward with the people that are interested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So again, November, go ahead.
Just, I don't know, I mean, I'd like to have a little discussion on it before we move on, if that's possible.
Would anyone like to have any further discussion? We are under a time constraint. This is supposed to end approximately at 6:40 because we do have that time-specific open house for the bond.
Okay.
At 7:30.
We have all these people here. I just wondered what they feel like. Maybe they'd like us to go ahead on it, but I don't know. I'd like to vote on it tonight, but I understand our rule, but I'd like to hear maybe for at least one of them, if that's okay. They're going to probably feel like they have to come back.
It would take a change of rule.
No, I understand.
And so, I'm also willing to withdraw. I mean, that was just, I guess I was proposing to request a delay. If the council feels strongly that we want to move ahead on it, then I'm open to that. But either way, I guess, we have 2 items after this, correct?
Yes. I don't think that they'll take too long. We just need to be conscious of the time here.
Okay.
Is there any, we could actually overrule that with a 5 vote, is that correct?
Mr. Harding has, made mention of possibly withdrawing his request, and I don't know how the rest of the council members feel about it, but even if he didn't, then yes, as we discussed when we made this rule, there could always be a motion to suspend the rules that would need 5 votes in order to carry.
So we were just to find out where the council is. I move that we suspend the rules and move on this tonight.
Is there a second to that motion? Okay, a second by Mr. Van Buren. We have a motion and a second. I'd like to have just some discussion on that motion for just a minute. Is there anyone here that has, I know we all have concerns. We know that this is not a perfect plan, but is there anyone here that has such concern, or any of your neighbors that you know that they have such concern that you don't feel it would be appropriate to vote on this tonight? Okay.
Sorry, I guess they want this on record. So just as a note, this has been out to the neighborhoods. We've had not just one big meeting, but I've brought it up in several other neighborhood meetings with several of the neighborhoods. And it's been on Open City Hall, and so I think they've had ample opportunity to make their comments for months now. This is not a quickly done plan, nor has it just been done recently.
I'm going to say just the opposite for my neighborhood, because that additional commercial has only been on there for what, the last month maybe, if that? Yeah, so I would say as far as my neighborhood goes, that's a significant change that I would like more additional comment.
Okay. We do have a motion and a second. So I will call for any other discussion.
Yeah, I wasn't going to ask to have it delayed, but when Dave did, I kind of felt a little bit of relief that maybe I'd have a little more time, just because of the large implications of the whole thing. So I wouldn't mind having a little more time. I don't feel super strongly about it, but if we have more time, I mean, unless there's some really urgent reason why it has to be moved along, I just don't sense that this is a time-sensitive thing. So I'm not trying to be obstructionist at all. I just like to let it settle, talk to a few more people, make sure I understand how this will work and so on, and make sure that I mean, even just tonight, after I raised the anxiety about, well, you know, the density might get reduced. We got a developer asking for a reduced density right out of the gate. So I thought, well, okay, this is a process I'd like to understand a little better. So I guess I wouldn't mind having a little more time. But
I'm just sensitive to the fact they all came tonight. They've been testifying. They would probably like us to make a decision. So that's why I make the motion. It has nothing to do with me personally.
Thank you, Georges. Thank you, Georges.
And given that we have a neighborhood chair who's made a request for more time for her neighborhood to digest this and possibly come with additional comments, I would support bringing it back.
And then just speaking about the process, if you remember that most of us were on the council where we had this discussion whether it would even be a possibility to pass something on week one. And there were several that said, you know, this shouldn't even be a possibility. We should always have two hearings. And so I think for reasons like that, I mean, I'm also I don't feel strongly about this. If everyone felt like it was a good thing just to move forward, I'd be okay with that. But just for the process, I think this is something that fits with something probably best continued for 2 weeks.
Do you still want to maintain that motion? Okay, that motion has been withdrawn then at this point. And it will be on November 13th. It will be an item on November 13th. Okay, we will now move to item number 8. Nope, number 7. An ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 77.5 acres of real property generally located at 1860 South East Bay Boulevard from Regional Shopping Center SC3 and planned industrial commercial PIC to public facilities. It's in the East Bay neighborhood, and Josh Yost will present.
Thank you. Just to give you an overview, this is the vicinity map showing the general location of the golf course here. And the two areas that will be rezoned, this, if I can go to the next slide, this area comes out of the SC3 zone, and this area comes out of the PIC zone. So everything within those areas, and this shows you the general plan for this as well, that will be updated in the future. So showing you the legal description here, everything inside this line essentially will move to PF. So this SC3 section and this PIC section, leaving this remainder in the northwest to be rezoned by the proponents of the medical school and the associated housing development. This was brought to community development by economic development under direction from the council, and will serve to bring all of the future configuration and area of the golf course under the public facilities zone, signaling the city's intent and policy that it remain as such, and will remove these prospective zones that were put in place in order to facilitate development. So other than as we talked about earlier, the needed master or general plan amendments will be brought forward by economic development shortly. Planning Commission unanimously recommended the adoption of this zone map amendment, and I can take any questions.
Okay, I think we answered a lot of those questions in work meeting today. There is an implied motion. Thank you, Josh. This is open for are there any neighborhood chairs that would like to talk to address this? Any public comment anyone would like to comment from the public? See, here comes Becky. Very good.
Becky Bogdan, Provo, Utah. Personally, not as a neighborhood chair, but personally, I think it's cool. And I support that because I think that it shows the intention of what our golf course is, and it gives our residents a peaceful feeling that it will remain a golf course for a long period of time, and that if it ever is to be sold, it has to go through a big ordeal in order to do that. So I'm for this.
Thank you. Again, this is the first hearing on this particular item, though we have discussed it many times as this was brought forward with medical school. Is there anyone that would like to continue this until the next meeting? Seeing no objection, we have an implied motion on the table. And is there any discussion on that motion? Mr. Van Buren.
I just want to say thanks for getting this done.
Okay, we will call for a vote. Oh, Mr. Sewell.
Just wanted to say I think it's always good to be clear about our intention, and so I think this is a good way of doing that.
Thank you. So we will call for a vote. Those in favor? That passes unanimously. We'll move on to item number 8, a resolution regarding a pledge of support and to identify measures to be taken to address Utah's housing needs across the state and in Provo City. This will be presented by Mr. Harding, it says there.
All right, that's exciting. So we took a look at this in a work meeting a couple of weeks ago, and then brought it to the council meeting, at which point there was some concern about the word, I think particularly the word insure. And so we took that back and proposed to change from committed to ensuring to strive to achieve the goal. And then earlier in our work meeting, we had another suggestion to make a change to one of the whereases and to strike and fees from a whereas to make it aligned with our current thinking on where we're moving. And so that's line 40 there. So that has been, the and fees has been struck out. So what we have left is before us here. Thank you for the visual on that. If we actually could go back to that last visual so we could see both pages. All right, so I believe that's it.
Wear the glasses on to read it now.
That's true, okay. That is where it is at in the entirety. So, and that's what we are considering at this point. And I guess, are there any questions? We may want to go to the public comment and then we could discuss it more. But I guess as the presenter, if there's any questions, I'll entertain them now.
I just wanted to make a comment, and just this whole Westside plan seems it's appropriate. I think that we're reminding ourselves and publicly affirming that we're committed to doing what we can to provide affordable housing, and we've got a real opportunity and as we move forward. So hopefully this isn't just an empty gesture, and that we think that through carefully as we're moving through that development of that area.
Thank you. Chair? Oh, Dave.
So I think when it comes to affordable housing, especially on the west side, the challenge will be actually getting the plan built as we have seen it, because those areas of LDR or MDR will still be a challenge, I think, despite all of the meetings and compromises. I wouldn't expect to get more density than we already have in the plan. We have 500 more units than previously, but I think it's some of those, either the commercial nodes or the LDR will still be a challenge for certain neighborhoods.
Mr. Jones, maybe you can help me out with some of these things. As far as we don't want this to be an empty resolution. We want to make sure that we are supportive of all types of housing. But I see a word, something in here in section 2, minimize barriers to the provision of all housing and provides housing opportunities for all income and life stages. We're not committing to anything specific, but minimizing barriers, it's pretty wide open and it can be interpreted with so many different things. Isn't that right? Are we committing ourselves to anything that is?
Well, you're not passing any legislation, right? I mean, the bottom line is you're committing yourselves to do whatever you view yourselves committing yourselves to do by passing this. It's a statement of intent, and it's nothing more or less than that. So.
Thank you.
I before said that we shouldn't sign anything or resolve to do something that we don't feel that we can actually achieve, and that's why I think it was important to change the term ensure to do our best, because we can't really guarantee anything here, nor can we guarantee what future councils will do. But we can show that we support affordable housing. There's probably more affordable housing in Provo than any other town in the valley, but we're still going forward and trying to create new opportunities.
I suppose I'd also add that you're pledging to minimize, not to eliminate barriers.
Thank you. That helps also. Dave?
And I think, you know, as we've talked about before, this is also a message to other cities. It's an encouragement to invite them to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
Dave?
I'm sorry, I didn't notice this before, but isn't there a grammatical problem in number 1 there? City pledges to adopt and implement measures that are designed to minimize barriers to the provision of all housing and provides housing opportunity for all incomes and life stages.
It looks like the S is actually stricken out but didn't get removed.
Yeah, it does have a strike through.
So what's it, how's it supposed to read?
Well, it's to minimize barriers to the provision of all housing and provide housing opportunities for all incomes. So
Oh, okay,
it works.
Thank you.
The S was throwing us off, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. This is open for public comment. And we'll invite anyone that would like to speak to this to come forward.
Beth Alligood, Provo resident. I'm gonna say almost the same thing I did last time. I understand the need to be leaders, and I think that as Provo residents, as Provo people who are involved in our community, we have been that. Look at the Southwest Area Plan you just looked. We have been trying to bring a whole bunch of different interests together to provide opportunities for affordable housing. But like Mr. Connect was saying, I don't know if housing affordability as designated is quite possible when you're looking at balancing housing in the city with 10,000 square foot lots, because you're not going to get a 10,000 square foot lot house under $150,000. It's not going to happen. But we are trying to provide that. A couple of things that I'm concerned about is, number one, it says, and provide housing opportunities for all incomes and life stages. As a city, it's not our responsibility to provide things for people. We can provide an opportunity for developers to come in and do it, but we can't dictate what developers do with the land that they purchase or what landowners do with the land to an extent. I feel this, to me, feels like we're giving up some authority to other entities to come in and dictate to our city. When we think and coordinate regionally about local land use decisions, should we have gone to Utah County and asked about the Southwest Area Plan and how it's going to affect the region as a whole and how it affects the airport down there and a regional sports park? These are the things that I think we as a city are very community oriented. We think about these, we consider these, we have the subsidized housing here, we have the apartments here, we have the land use maps that we look as a whole, and I don't think giving up our autonomy to other entities is a good idea. We are leaders in this valley, and I think as we move forward with the plans that we already have, those other cities will see this. I'm just concerned that allowing other people to come and dictate to us is giving up some of that autonomy. But again, that's my opinion. Thank you.
Jonathan Hill, Fort Utah. I'll admit this is the first time I've seen this, and this last week over fall break, I was actually in California in the Bay Area, visiting family out there, and we were talking about affordable housing, right? This is a big deal in California. It's a big issue. One of the cities I was visiting there, Salinas, California, is considering on this ballot a rent control for their city to try to do it. And I wish I had the article in the newspaper with me because I thought it was really interesting. The article essentially said, we all know this won't work, but we have to do something. And in my mind, every time someone says we have to do something, it leads to bad policy. because they're just doing it to do something, not because it's a good idea. And I see a lot of things here that kind of push us in that direction. We have to minimize barriers. We have to reform existing practices that negatively impact housing affordability. These are things that are just going to limit us, not make it so that we can have innovative ideas. Some classic examples, we could talk about the Southwest Plan. Does having varying density affect affordability? Sure, higher density would be cheaper, right? Does that fall under an existing practice that negatively impacts housing affordability? Does putting in a regional sports park that could be put into housing instead affect it? It just makes it so I think it's going to limit us and make it really hard to balance the other priorities that we have as a city. And that creates some concerns for me, because affordability is important, and I think we do need to be careful that we're not making artificial barriers, et cetera. But in the end, there's only so much we can do, and we have to balance the other priorities as well.
Becky Bogdan, Provo, Utah. Jonathan brought up a good point a while back. He said what concerned him, and it got me thinking, is we do, what Dave said, we do have a lot of the affordable housing here in Provo. In my neighborhood, that is starting to become a problem, right? Because we are now the lower income, and we have a hard time functioning in wards and schools and different things. But as we do this, are we thinking as it countywide, are we starting to become the ghetto of Utah County? That's something that I would like us to think about, because even in my section of street in the Lakewood neighborhood, is that what we're starting to do, is starting to make us so low income that we're not going to be able to pull ourselves up. Thanks.
Okay, no more public comment. We will close that portion and bring it back to the council for any discussion. Any comments? Mr. Van Buren.
I have 3 or 4 comments regarding certain lines of the ordinance. First of all, I'm against the resolution. I'm against the resolution because I just don't think it. We mentioned we need to sign this so we give a message to other cities in the county that we're for affordable housing. I think a better message would be to say, we're Provo City and Orem and American Fork and Spanish Fork. It's time you stepped up. This is what we have in rentals. This is what we have in affordable housing. We're carrying a heavy load for this county. We expect you to step up, not put a resolution that the Salt Lake Chamber put together and all join together. I just don't think that's the message. This is the message I don't want to give to other communities. I'd rather give a lot different message to them, that they have a responsibility to help out. A couple things here. It says on line 23 and 24, it says, whereas housing affordability definition means the ability of a household to occupy a housing unit paying no more than 30% of household income. I think that definition comes from, I can't remember now where I read it, but it's quite an old definition. And I think maybe circumstances, economies, that definition might change a little bit. I'm not so sure that's a solid rule that we need to make policy on, because I think that might have to change. Housing is more expensive than it used to be. Utilities are more expensive than they used to be. And that rule that 30% is the cutoff, I'm not sure it's good to use that now. And you know, I'm going against, that's kind of a national standard, I think. But so I have a hard time using that as our standard. Down on line 37 and 38, it says housing affordability will improve overall prosperity and air quality. And I'm like, are there studies, are there statistics, are there things that show us that that'll happen? It sounds good. That's a good argument, but I don't think there's anything that can say that will happen without a whole bunch of other things happening. So again, it's a sound good statement, but I'm not so sure I do that. Then when we get over the other section, what we've been talking about, where it calls for action, we've tried to make those action words very soft so we can say, yeah, we're going to take an action, but maybe we're not going to take very much action. And I just think minimize barriers to provisions of all housing, provide housing of opportunity for all incomes and all life stages. That's so encompassing. And as the city of Provo, is that really What kind of barriers are we going to minimize? In a few weeks, we're going to have a presentation here for impact fees on building permits. And it doesn't look pretty. And we're going to go right against all this now, and then we're going to come to that meeting and we're going to say, okay, now we need to raise all these impact fees because we need the money for our structure. No argument there. But is that in line with these? I don't think so. Review and inform or reform existing practices. Unless we say which is existing practices, or which things are we going to reform, are we committing to, I just don't like sending a resolution that now is going to be used by some other group, and they can come back to us and say, well, you said you would, but what does that mean? Then there's a statement on line 6 there that says align housing, infrastructure, and economic development efforts. I don't know what that line means at all. I don't know what that does to this resolution, what it adds to it, or what it takes away from it. I don't know. Again, I missed work meeting today, and I apologize, and maybe you clarified that, so you could probably help me with that. So for those reasons, I just can't support a resolution to join people so we look like we're all together on this thing. I think we can send a message to other cities to tell them, yeah, sometimes we can't do everything for everyone. I mean, somebody talked about they're in the Bay Area. Well, there's places in the Bay Area you can't have affordable housing for everybody. It's just not there. It's not going to happen. And sometimes I don't know that we can say we're going to do that because I don't know how we can do that. Maybe some people are going to have to live in Santaquin to find affordable housing. Maybe that's just the reality of life. Instead of trying to make promises that we can do it all here, we don't have that much property left to make huge changes. And so I'll be voting against this resolution. Thank you.
George. And then George.
Yeah, I don't see anything in here that's not already part of our stated goals as a city. I mean, we have already made a commitment to affordable housing. We've already made commitments to housing for all incomes and life stages. It's in our general plan. So I mean, this isn't a policy. I think it's just it's a moral declaration of principle. And we're not saying we're going to do anything. We're saying we're committed to being attentive to these problems. And if we don't, we're in big trouble. I mean, the study that came with this was pretty extensive. Housing in Provo is going to be like Seattle by 2050 if we don't do anything. So I mean, I think if we don't think we can do anything, then certainly we won't. And if we say we're going to try to do as much as we can, I think that's a gesture in the right direction. I disagree. I mean, I think there's low risk in passing a resolution like this with the possibility of some high yield. And I would personally be happy to walk this over to the Orem City Council and walk this over to Lehigh and any other city in the county and make a plea to them. Say, hey, look, we passed this because we're already doing this and we're going to continue to do this, but we need you to make a similar kind of commitment. But I don't think we're committing to anything that we aren't already committed to. I think that's a little bit misleading.
Okay, I have a problem with feel-good resolutions also, so I don't know where I am. You're pretty articulate.
Dave?
Which Dave?
You both got, I saw your hand first, so.
Okay. So I appreciate Kay's comments. It got me thinking, and certainly, like number one, what do we mean by minimizing barriers? And so I wrote down a few thoughts here. On 1 and 2, where we talk about minimizing barriers and reviewing and reforming existing practices, as part of our housing committee, we've been talking about and in process of reviewing and combining the A&S overlay, and in part of that process, we've looked at the central part of Provo, where you may have older, deeper lots that they're not very wide, they don't necessarily lend themselves, because of the small house, to creating an accessory apartment, but in the backyard, if there's enough property, having that carriage house or that casita, that detached accessory, which is not currently possible, but we would like to make that possible if the conditions are met and are appropriate. And so that's one thing that we are looking at, which right now we have barriers and it's not a possibility. We have NeighborWorks that is looking at doing a pocket neighborhood, but there are some technicalities that tend to make it not possible. We just saw Dave Gardner go through all sorts of trouble trying to meet the engineering requirements on a piece of property where the old county jail was. And he was able to finally get through after we had a DAPR committee meeting and resolve some of those issues. And so I think we are serious about reviewing and reforming and adjusting our policies to make these creative housing projects work, because sometimes it's just the technicalities that stand in the way. And if you're serious about making affordable housing, then you address those. If you're not, then you just leave up the barriers and you don't have affordable housing. And some communities apparently do that. So, and then number 6, aligning housing, infrastructure, and economic development efforts. That's the Westside plan. That's what we just did out there by looking at our infrastructure, our economic needs, and trying to align our housing needs all at the same time. So I would say that we are doing this, and I am sensitive to committing to things that we cannot possibly do, and that's why we changed that wording from ensuring to working towards the goal of housing affordability. And it's perhaps the unreachable star when it comes to our low income in Provo and the high housing cost. But as long as we keep it as a goal, and I'll just finish by saying that a lot of what you find in here, I believe, goes right along with our Vision 2030 and general plan. If you look in those documents, you will see very similar statements, I believe. So in that respect, I'm not sure that we're coming up with very much new. I mean, we could just probably pull chapter and verse out of our own existing documents.
Gary?
George?
Just line 59, review and reform existing practices that would negatively impact housing affordability. Impact fees are going to do that. I've had a problem with line number 2 all along, and I think for that reason I'm going to vote against it.
One final comment. Impact fees are always an issue, and we make a choice to not charge 100%, and whether we charge 80% or what percent we charge, that is something that we review, and I think we review it clearly in the context of how it affects affordability.
Can I just, if I was a developer against impact fees, I would use line 59, number 2, against us. Because it does negatively affect, without question.
Mr. Harding, your turn.
Because of the time, I'm going to make this very short. But I feel that this is not giving up any autonomy. This is us restating what we've committed to do, and this is what we are already doing, as has been pointed out many times. And I believe this is also what many communities are not doing, and I feel that this would be one of the strongest ways to ask them to do their part, and commit to do their part, because we've committed to doing our part, which we are already doing. I'm just going to not talk about that stuff because our time is very short. But I would say, if someone wants to come in and say, well, you can't charge us impact fees because you committed to this, I will say we're reviewing it and we're making the decision after considering it in the context, as Mr. Knecht said. So I imagine we will hear people point to these, and I think as long as we are having a genuine conversation about it and we're reviewing it, then I think we're good to go forward.
Mr. Sewell?
So I'd like to make a motion to suggest one more wording change. I support the overall goals of the resolution and hope to vote for it, but number one still bothers me, and let me just briefly explain. The way I read it, it says the city pledges to adopt and implement measures that minimize barriers to the provision of all housing. Not quite sure what that means. But then the way I interpret the end is that we're also pledging to adopt and implement measures that are designed to provide housing opportunity for all incomes and life stages. And as has been mentioned, in our system, it's really the market that provides the opportunities, and it's more our job to minimize the barriers. So the proposed wording change that I would make would be for number one to say, and this is a motion, minimize barriers to the provision of housing opportunities for all incomes and life stages.
I would second that.
Discussion on that. I struggle with the word pledges. We promise to do that. It's a pledge to me as a promise, and I'm struggling with the concept myself. If we're already doing it, I understand we're encouraging others to do it, but we are actually promising. When my pledge is my promise, and so I struggle with that myself.
I would like to make a substitute motion.
I'll make the substitute motion that we continue this item so we can hopefully work out these details, not on the dais, and get something that those who feel that they want to work towards, something that can pass. We can work on that off the dais. That's
I would also encourage the question, if we are not unanimous or close to unanimous, is it really worthwhile for us to do this as a council? So if you're going to bring this up one more in 3 weeks, I'd ask that we ask that question of ourselves as we bring it forward.
Real fast, I would just ask that the word reform be taken out of number 2. I don't mind reviewing it, but reforming says you'll actually do something about that.
Okay, we have a substitute motion to table this until November 13th. Is that, you make it a date specific? Sure. Okay, a second. Those in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously. We will now adjourn. I guess do we close the meeting, or do we we will close this?
Go ahead and adjourn, because this meeting is over.
Okay, we will adjourn and this meeting by unanimous consent, and invite you to stay if you're interested in discussing the bond. We will be having an open house that will begin at 7:30. We will have discussions, a presentation on where we got, how we got here, discussion for, discussion against, and then open it to public comment. And that will begin again at 7:30. Thank you for being here tonight.